Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 346 of my modded Factorio playthrough. We've finally gotten finished with the distractions of low UPS, high pollution, and low power. But luckily, that's all taken care of now. And I've been doing some small fixes to the factory between episodes here, but look what happened to the pollution cloud. It's finally gone. But it's going to come back, at least to some extent, when we start making resources again. Before we continue, I'll cover a couple of things that I worked on. I added more stuff to Circuit HUD. The acids is the same, but I did add all of the alien artifacts. Because these are actually going to be quite important, because these are going to go into spaceship parts. So it's probably good to keep an eye on it to make sure we have a good selection of orbs. We should have all of the big ones. Small ones come and go, and we need some amount of the regular artifacts. So, just because there's so much to track, it seemed like it would be good to put on there. And then I added saline water and mineralized water to the gas bus and just called it fluids and gases, so we can have an idea of what's going on there. Junk warehouse is still there, ore bus is still there, stone byproducts, but the big one is power. I added a lot more information, that there's two rows, green and red. First, the row on the bottom, the red, this is the activity of the current electrical network. So A is just the accumulator. It has conditions which will turn on based on certain power sources. So like before, if 234, 235, or plutonium is burning, we'll get a little indicator, and that's just based on a single reactor, whatever's hooked up to it. Like in this case, for uranium, it's just this reactor. So this has to go below 800 to get a signal. And it's probably going to take a little while, but that's how that works. But there's some other ones, like for example, solar panels. And it's not on because it's night. And this was an excellent opportunity to use the power combinator, which is something I haven't really used right here. And it can output a couple of different signals. So the way I set this up is by having a solar panel all by itself on its own network, because if I hooked it up to the rest of the network, it wouldn't work correctly. And it needed a power draw, so it has an inserter, and it's nighttime, so it's not getting any power. And part of this, because we have our high tier night vision, it's kind of hard to tell if solar is actually making any power. So the way power combinator works is you just attach it to the network, and it will automatically connect a power wire to that network, whether you want it to or not. And then I took this power wire down and specifically pulled the signal, just the lightning bolt there, of how much power it's currently generating. And if it's generating any power at all, send a solar panel signal here, which eventually finds its way onto our HUD. And right around 5:30 is when it's going to start producing power. So we should see it soon. I also did a similar signal for our burner here, but the problem is the burner produces power very unreliably. So it's not as simple as the power switch is engaged, because it's always going to be engaged based on the settings. So what I did is I changed a priority for these splitters. So each bank of 8 heat sources gets priority first. So this one on the bottom gets first priority because it's split here and then split evenly between them. And then split up there, and then it kind of keeps going down the chain. And there's an inventory sensor here reading the power on this one, because that's the first one I can get it to fit. And all it's doing is checking, I believe, if it's above 800 degrees, which is about as high as it needs to be to get full power out of this. And this is just the current temperature. So basically what it's saying is, yes, we have 8 groups of these burners, but is the first burner group actually producing maximum power? So 1/8 power. And if that is the case, we will get a little white square there. And it could be any fuel, that's just the indicator I use because that's typically what the fuel ends up being. But the sun's about to come up here. It looks like it just did as I zoomed in, where now it's producing power. And if you look at the signals here, it's 1 kilowatt so far. And it might be easier just to fly down there so I can click on things to show them. So we get down here, you can click on the power combinator to see everything that it's doing. Power consumption, power production, maximum consumption, and maximum production. But it's only this tiny little network, which is just the inserter and the power combinator itself. So that signal goes through, And very little power is actually being used right now. Just 400 watts for the inserter, but it needed to be something that would always be drawing some amount of power. So basically this is saying, is anything drawing power? If so, you get a solar panel. And that's kind of my little hack, because if you put it down here, it would be based on the whole solar network. And then when it's connected, which it essentially always is, it would just draw the data from the factory. So by putting that panel all on its own, we are able to get a cool little indicator that tells us when we're actually producing solar power. And sigh, now we have to go back up there. So that's kind of neat that just this row in the bottom tells you when the power production methods are turning on and off. So it's a nice way at a glance to just kind of see what the factory's doing. Now there are some byproduct burners that are basically always going. In the end, it's just not that much power. So it's not really worth putting on here. Plus, you don't want to have like flashing lights turning on and off all the time. The data wouldn't make any sense to you if it was constantly flickering, so you kind of don't want it to do that. These are all of our power sources here. So we've covered most of those, but the other one is also, it's checking the rocket booster burner. And I feel like this thing has never run, but nonetheless, it had heat in it. It wasn't hot enough to generate power, but clearly it had burned some fuel. That what it does is it basically burns these rocket boosters when there is extra nitrogen products. It doesn't happen very often because it only burns it from the solid products, and it's normally 0. Nonetheless, it is something we can overload on, so I upgraded this to max tier technology, and it has the same check where it's checking to see if it's 800 degrees, in other words, at full power, and it'll probably never be on. And then the top row here is checking our resources. For one, it's all of the uraniums, the curium, the plutonium. It has 2 uraniums here because I'm using one to check the status of our extra warehouse right here, so it doesn't pollute the signals controlling these belts. So then when this warehouse is empty, we can just delete that and the number will be right. So it's checking all of our resources, and you can see we have no 234 or 235 left, which is by design. That's what we would expect because we are transitioning over to plutonium and then a mix of both of them, which will be automatic. But the other thing that it does here is we kind of need to know what is the fuel status of the factory. Because right now we have no 234, 235, but are we actually able to produce that power? To do that, we would need to be able to look inside the chests on the reactors themselves. So what I did is I switched all of these from requester to buffer chest. This will allow their resources to be in the network. So 234 is not running because one of these has nothing in it. This one has 8, this one has 8, this one has 4. And that's kind of what you would expect. So what these combinators do is we're pulling from the logistics network, and if it's a requester chest, it will not be on the logistics network because it's only things that are available, so we needed to use buffers. First, we divide the number of cells by the number of reactors, but because this is going to be a small number with a decimal point, I also multiply it times 10. So what this number means is we have 5.0 fuel cells on average per reactor. And does that make sense? Well, we've got 8, we've got 8, and we've got 4. So that would be 20 divided by 4 is our 5. And it isn't running, so this gives us an idea that when we get to around 5 fuel cells per reactor, some of them probably aren't going to be getting any more fuel cells. And this same thing is done for uranium and plutonium. With plutonium, it's kind of a pointless number because we already have plutonium on storage, but it does tell us across the factory on average how many fuel cells are available. And I did it in this way because just looking at this chest here for 235, you can say, oh, we have 100 cells. That means all of the reactors are supplied. And that's fine, but what happens when you have none, like with 234? They may or may not have enough fuel to run. So by doing it in this way, you're including both what's in these provider chests and what's actually at the reactor currently. So with plutonium, it's 64.0 on average for each reactor, and that's clearly a lot more than the minimum. And when we check most of these, they're at around 56 or so, plus the 400 that's just sitting right here. So that's how we got to that number. And with uranium, it's 56.0. Although I'm thinking, because the way that Factorio does numbers, that by multiplying it by 10, it's always going to be 0 on the end. So I wonder if we reverse this, if we get the more accurate number. So first it's multiplied by 10, and then it's divided by 48. Well, we can kind of test this by grabbing some of these and see what happens to the number. Okay, it does work. Because now we have 61.6. They'll grab the resources from us and get it fixed. So that order of operation should be a little better because of the way that Factorio calculates numbers. I don't think Factorio does decimals on signals. I think it has to be a whole number. But that will allow us to just track the status of the different fuel cells. And I'm worried if we did that, if those fuel cells are going to make it to the junk warehouse now. Because of the way the settings are. Pretty much. That might be a side effect of doing things this way. We could clean those up, but once it starts running, it's going to prefer to take those over the passive providers. So if we just wait it out, it should balance. We can get rid of this propane burner setup now. And one thing that I've been doing is checking out where are there steam engines in the factory, and 176 of them are right here. And the rest of these are all these 9s. And they're all of the turbines to get rid of this extra steam. So we could probably put a bunch of steam turbines in all here, because we don't really have any reason to be using steam engines anymore. They won't run at maximum efficiency, but it's still fine. It's kind of junk steam there. But this we don't need at all. I'm always hesitant to remove things because I want to make super sure that we don't actually need it anymore. But I think we're at that point now. This. It was just very dirty and inefficient. I don't know if this is going to make a hole in the robot zone. It's trashing the inventory nonetheless. That's because this stuff isn't automatically getting removed, because sometimes we actually do need it. And it's a little empty spot right there. So now that's a whole bunch of water we don't need. Probably don't really need this transformer here either. I don't often use them. They do kind of help early on, but once you have a lot of power methods, they're less useful. But we don't need this storage tank here anymore because it's not actually being stored there. And we might as well get rid of this unnecessary electrical signal so it doesn't confuse us if later on we are doing diagnosis, because whenever you're trying to diagnose a problem and you see a signal wire with no signal, you're like, oh, there must be a problem here because that's not right. The OCD part of me wants me to fix this. Because we can. Pipe visualizer has been upgraded. For better or for worse, I'm not sure if you like this compared to what it was before, but now they got these little colored squares for where the resources are going in and out. Nonetheless, it's still a really cool mod. But one cool thing, I don't know if this is a new feature or I just figured it out, but if you hover over a pipe and hit H, perfect save there, you can permanently keep on this highlight. So instead of having all of this stuff confusing you, you can just follow your one pipe. And this is the glycerol. And we're following it to all of the places that it goes. And just hover over an H again to make it go away. So that's pretty useful. Okay, was there a hole? Fantastic. So now, it looks like we just have those steam engines up there. Not sure what the rate would be on all of these, where it's 75 steam for each one at maximum speed. And since we can only do 60, that means we need 2 of them. And luckily, steam engine 3s go into the turbines. So, we're not going to be just overloaded with a bunch of steam engines. That whenever we need more turbines, they will get recycled. It's not very good power, but I don't feel like doing the alternative for this, so this is good enough. Basically just making the steam go away, essentially, and getting the tiniest amount of power for it. Okay, they've grabbed everything. Refresh, and no more steam engines in the factory. Now it's all turbines. Well, we're done making batteries, and we still need to go higher. It will certainly help with plutonium, because once we put a fuel cell in, it's going to keep running until the plutonium is gone, so we definitely need a lot more storage capacity. And where do we want to put it? It would be symmetrical to kind of keep going up like this, but there's some stuff right there that we'd have to move, and I don't know if I feel like that. Plus, technically, we might want to build something out here. And maybe we might want to build something right here as well. I really don't see us building more solar panels in the future. It's definitely a lot of power, and it's going to be kind of weird to select all of this. But it's about a gigawatt of power. And these are max tier panels. So that's what a gigawatt looks like. And then this is what 8 gigawatts looks like. So this is about 16 with both of those. So the density just isn't there. We can't practically cover our factory with solar panels anymore. However, they might help in the situation where we have like a brownout. Just to make sure the inserters and the robots can get the nuclear fuel where it needs to be. So we should probably keep this anyway. Well, let's about trash a bunch of trees to right about there. And we have all of this we don't need. So that should fit in just nicely, and it does. Although, it would be nice if this thing would snap with itself, so let's do that. Yep. And just need a little bit more cleared out here. Uh-oh. Robots are trying to charge. There we go. That's an awful lot of new batteries. This probably still won't be enough. But we don't want to do too much at one time here. Because one other thing that I've done is I've changed the balance of modules. Previously, the pollution cleaning modules were minus 75%, but that was to match the productivity modules, which were essentially plus 75%. So I walked them back down to 50. I didn't walk them back to 25 for balance reasons. So let me show you. Let's say we have an assembly machine and we need to make something that uses productivity modules. How about it's a coil chopper? That machine on its own, if you want to reduce pollution, right now it's making 0.5 per minute. If we put an efficiency in there, it goes to 0.1. And a pollution cleaning, it goes to 0.25. So it's interesting in the sense that because speed modules add so much power, that efficiency modules need to remove so much power, that they're actually more effective at removing pollution than a pollution cleaning. But this is kind of a weird example, because in this situation, you would just use both of those. In fact, you'd use an extra one to get it down to bare minimum of both. And now it uses 0.02 pollution. But that's not how you would be using these modules. We'd be using the modules with a productivity or a speed in there. So if we had a productivity, it would be 1.88. The efficiency would drop it to 1.25, but if we used a pollution cleaning, it's 1.13. So that's why I balanced it in that way, so that if you're using a productivity module, it's never better to use an efficiency module over a pollution cleaning, because efficiency modules, besides reducing pollution, they also reduce energy consumption, whereas the pollution module only reduces pollution, so it should always be better at pollution than productivities, with the exception of no modules at all. But if we're at that situation, then it doesn't really matter. And what about with a speed module? It makes 1.15, and efficiency drops it down to 1, and pollution cleaning drops it down to 0.75, so it's still better. And let's take it to the extreme. Best case scenario for pollution cleanings, where it's all productivities except one slot, which gives us 12.38 pollution. Adding the efficiency gets us down to like 11.25. It's a little bit, but because it was plus 1,000% of energy consumption, it doesn't really help that much. But then we put the pollution cleaning in there, and now it's 9.63. So clearly better under all circumstances, but it's not as insanely better. So before, when we were just adding one pollution cleaning across the factory, that might not have been the best thing to do. Because like in this situation, if we added two, then they cancel out. It still has the huge energy consumption, but the way the balance works here is that if you have one speed module, you need two efficiencies to counteract it. So now it's neutral, just has faster crafting speed. So in this machine situation, you can do that, and it would be perfectly balanced, just faster. And with the productivities, technically a pollution cleaning will actually take care of two of them. So you can do something like that to neutralize the pollution, but it still has the high energy consumption. And you don't quite have enough slots in this machine, but you would try to do that. So the end result of that is 100% extra energy consumption. So we'll have to try this, unfortunately, since I did use the pollution cleanings with minus 75% across the factory. Might have to check things again. It'll be whack-a-mole. Essentially, whenever anything is creating a bunch of pollution, and that very much makes sense that our battery production is now starting to smoke up the place. You can see that everything was essentially zero because the factory was incredibly dormant prior to this. But it's way better than it was back then. So our chemical plants are making about 4K of pollution, which is actually kind of a lot when you look out here. It would be right around here. But for now, we can give it a shot where it's just one pollution cleaning and then the rest of them are the productivities. I kind of don't want to go through the factory and change the modules out because we're getting pretty close to doing tier 8 modules anyway, and then we would do that again, and also maximum tier machines and all of that, so it's not the best time to be doing the same thing again. And there we go, our uranium fuel cells are at 53.9, so the numbers are working and going down. Well, let's go to the bus, because we have some new items we can make, and we can just kind of go down the list of everything we have access to and just make sure we've got top tier of everything available, because the longer you go using old parts, just the worse your factory is. So basically the second you can make it, you probably should. So any new logistics items here? Not particularly. Production items, yeah, we've got top tier mining drills, which are really good upgrades because each higher tier drill uses less and less pollution. So the first electric mining drill had a speed of 0.5 and 10 pollution, where the last one has a mining speed of 8 and 2 pollution. So mining drills are really important things to upgrade. And the better offshore pumps, sure, that will reduce energy consumption a little bit. And the better pump jacks. Once you get to the top tier of machines, so many items go into it where the ball ends up being a pretty good idea. Well, let's get some resources ready here, because we are going to need blue circuits and tungsten carbide plate. So they should already be available on the network, so we just need to make the request for it. Tungsten carbide, and let's see. Intermediates load. Yeah, that's the, it's right here. Why didn't it want to go in? I wonder if it just barely wasn't ready in time. Well, there it goes. We might want to put a second train down there. And is pollution bad? Well, in that spot it is. I was getting a little spoiled by having a nice clean pollution cloud because we're back to 2.8 gigawatts. Mining drills are up here. And yeah, there's really no room to put anything else up in here, so we'll just remove it. Things are really cleaning up around here. And it was especially messy right here. But I think it's cleared out, and I do not want to go through that trying to clean it up. All the mining drills just go into each other. As useful as malls are, it does take a little while to get all this set up, but it's quite useful in the end game when you can just direct insert everything into each other. Makes life a lot easier. Also have a warning for the fisher, but that's fine. It's just saying we're draining it really fast, but nonetheless it says it'll last for 20 hours. I think it'll last a lot longer than that, but okay. Let's give this a shot and check out the junk warehouse. Good, we don't have all of our drills in there. And this is set to make 10 drills in total. And it basically made them already. So hard to tell if the entire chain's working because it might have been dropping drones in here, but looks like this was set incorrectly, but I kind of remember that. Let's just put them where they're supposed to go. Alright, well, let's do upgrade planner, and I always like to remove some of the junk when it piles up like this so nothing on accident happens. It seems like we're basically at that point, so let's kind of clear this out. Leave the pipes, I suppose. Now let's do some drills from purple to max tier of green. Then we'll worry about the modules later. But the pollution is returning. But we are actively producing a ton of resources right now, so it makes sense. That's one of them. There's a second. Number 3. There's these extra mines I put down here, just to try to clear up the original resources. But technically this diorite would be number 4, because I don't think we ever actually replaced it, so it's going to run out soon. Rubite is somehow still working with this tiny little patch right here. Our crotinium is tucked in here. And also our coal mine. The offshore pumps do not feed into each other. So this is as simple as changing this recipe around and just letting that go. What about water pump jacks? Well, we don't actually need that many of them. Same with regular pump jacks, I think. I've been handcrafting them, but they come up so rarely that we probably could wait. I don't want to make a huge line of these if we're not often using them. We'll see the next huge build that involves tons of pump jacks, then maybe. But I try to use the offshore pumps when possible. Nothing in science. We could automate making labs. That might be useful later on, but right now we don't need them. Could do max tier tanks and our pump. I think the pump is kind of buried in here somewhere. Yeah, like right there. So let's just find another spot. And maybe, like right there, switch it to the best one and let it transfer everything over. Although, interestingly, this does require copper tungsten pipes. I wonder how many other things do. They do go into a few things. Kind of annoying, but I think we do need to deliver it, or at least make the pipe somewhere. Because when you look at this, most of this is actually going into heat stuff, which is kind of all the way up here. So because of that, kind of want to copy this up. It'll be a little farther for the robots to have to go, but they'll manage. I believe this is a request for the last of the new resources. So now we are using everything we worked so hard to make. But we should be getting that soon. And we'll take up the next slot. I'm glad we made the main bus so wide, so we have all of these spaces still available. Because that would have been terrible if we ran out of belt space. Although the struggle now is figuring out exactly how to get these resources in here, because I think we basically didn't have any room. It's a robot zone and charge pad here that we would have to sacrifice, but if we did, we'd still have some space. But the zone's still good. That will get the copper tungsten plates here eventually. And there's the request. So eventually those pumps will be made. Now we need the storage tanks. And it looks like we were kind of doing it in line here. Although we did do it the old-fashioned way. But we did reduce the inventory requirements here, but nonetheless, we can make this a lot cleaner. Oh yeah, these requests are just kind of strange. Not sure how this was fixed before, but let's fix it again, but better this time. Trash absolutely everything here. Well, that was monotonous, but everything should be set up now with the buffer chests, so they will automatically get cleaned up as required. So we just need to copy everything over, get rid of the thing that's direct inserted, and turn on buffers. Let's see, another intermediates load error. Let's see, I think that will do it. It just wasn't set to automatic. Okay, so we just need these better tanks here. There we go. Now it worked. I guess these could all be the better version of the assemblers while we're at it. So it's just a really large tank. It holds 100K, which is nice for figuring out percentages because you don't have to do any math in your head. It's just 100K. So none of the old tanks. This list keeps getting longer. But now we need our new stuff. And we'll upgrade parts of the factory as required. So bioprocessing, nothing right now. I would eventually like to do the better types of pulps, but that doesn't really require us make any new machines. And let's see, power, certainly. We've got our better power poles, but because these use copper wire, which is bad to put on a drone, we should probably continue to belt it like we have up until this point. Running out of spaces. And there it is. Okay, I guess I'll keep the spacing that everything else has been doing here. It looks super funny. There we go. Let's see both of these work. Yep, seems good. And seems good. Last one we have to do is substations, which is mostly the same. But it also needs those blue circuits, and I think it'll be kind of funny, but I think we can just jump all of this. The spaghetti is growing. But this is a little more efficient than using bots for this because it uses so many circuits to make these. Not that we actually use that many of them, but power poles and their related items are kind of resource intensive as far as the number of items that have to be picked up and moved around. So it's probably a good idea to stick with belts for this. Hey, that's not connected. Let's see what happened there. Ah, well, beltception to fix it. Surprised it didn't get all mixed up. Well, yet again, new logistics request. Get rid of junk. Feels like not that long ago that we got those. But now we are finally at max tier of our electric distribution items. And our uranium-235 is slowly reducing. So I'm guessing when it gets somewhere similar to around 5.0, like with 234, is when all the reactors are going to start shutting down. But it's an average, so it won't be exact. In running this and testing it, we can kind of get an idea of what the minimum is before problems start to happen. Nonetheless, plutonium will pick up. Let's check out these poles. It has an even wider range. That's pretty crazy for a medium pole. And then, I don't know, there's all this going on here, so we might not be able to easily test this because of the grid. But where our old ones can go 50, the new ones can go 60. So you have to take my word on it. But there's our maximum tier of substation, so that's pretty huge how far apart they can be and still power everything. It's almost worth upgrading the factory to just have substations everywhere and just have permanent electricity no matter where you build something, but I don't know if I want to go through that right now. Okay, power is done. Logistics. We definitely can make the best repair pack, and it doesn't need the previous repair pack, so we can just make those. And we do need to work on robot stuff. And I'm thinking that's actually probably the next thing we'd want to do here. So let's get research going now. But that's going to have to wait until the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.